Like an ice-cold glass of water, quenching a dying thirst in a desert of live-action superhero entertainment, not the unlikeliest of champions, but certainly not the first one you would think of after Batman. Not as strong as a locomotive, can't jump over a building, but way faster than a speeding bullet. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of The Flash. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. 80stees.com started off as the source for t-shirts inspired by all things pop culture from the 1980s, but there's more to the 80s than just the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 70s, the decade that paved the way for the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 90s, the decade that carried on the legacy of the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 2000s, because the 80s isn't just a decade, it's a state of mind. Whether your interests are laser focused on one thing, say movies, there's plenty of choices from Jaws to Shaun of the Dead. If your interests bounce around, they've got shirts from cartoons to video games, superheroes to music and wrestling. From Transformers to Dungeons & Dragons, Gollum to Ron Burgundy, Darkwing Duck to Powerpuff Girls, from Pong to Street Fighter 2. Their goal is to have something for everyone that loves retro pop culture. Whether your favorite cartoon is Jem and the Holograms or Robotech, or your favorite movie is The Karate Kid or 16 Candles, you'll find something you love. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. Thanks again to 80stees.com. The Flash is a live-action television series that originally aired one season of 22 episodes from September of 1990 to May of 1991, developed by Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, the same guys who were writing the Rocketeer movie at the same time. What? Barry Allen is a cop in a family of cops. His brother is a cop, his father was a cop,
his mother was a mother.
And neither of those guys gives him the respect they give all the other cops in the force because Barry doesn't walk a beat. Barry's a forensic scientist. He uses his brain to catch criminals. He uses logic and iodine and aluminum sulfate, glycerin, potassium nitrate, magnesium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, sulfur, tannic acid, phosphorus, and that's just the stuff on the top shelf. One fateful night, a storm rages as a gang of motorcyclists known as the Dark Riders terrorize the city. In an attempt to bring them to justice, Barry toils away at the Central City Police crime lab when suddenly lightning strikes and changes his destiny and his DNA forever. The lightning, combined with an unreproducible cocktail of dangerous police crime-fighting chemicals, imbues Barry with the power to move at incredible speed, which he will need as he moves from government-sanctioned law enforcement to vigilante. Barry teams up with Dr. Tina McGee, a scientist from Star Labs. Together they develop a protective suit and surveillance matrix to enable him to take crime fighting directly to the criminals and avenge his brother's death as the city's new superhero, The Flash. The Flash was created by writer Gardner Fox and artist Harry Lampert. He made his debut in Flash Comics issue 1 in January of 1940, published by DC Comics. However, that Flash, the original Flash, was named Jay Garrick, sporting a metal helmet, a long-sleeve shirt, and baggy short ankle boots. This Flash was a college student who became the Flash after an accident causing him to inhale a bunch of chemicals at the campus lab. According to Lampert, the idea for the character came from Fox, and that Flash was essentially just a riff on the Roman god Mercury, hat and all. Superheroes weren't as popular after World War II as they had been during and before. By 1951, all 3 books the Jay Garrick version of The Flash regularly appeared in were cancelled. That said, in 1956, DC Comics brought the Flash back as a totally different guy in a totally different DC universe. Superheroes were once again in vogue as the introduction of the Comics Code Authority, or censorship, made popular genres like horror and crime less appealing to publishers. The new Flash, now named Barry Allen, first appeared in Showcase issue 4, this time created by Robert Kanigher and artist Carmine Infantino, or rather, rebooted by Kanigher and Infantino as a more modern character in keeping with the times. Barry Allen's Flash was dressed in a sleek new costume evocative of the original but less of an homage to Mercury, and a brand new origin story. Instead of a college student, he was now a cop. Barry got a new love interest named Iris West, and the power-inducing lab accident was now supercharged by lightning. He named himself The Flash after his favorite comic book character, the Jay Garrick version of The Flash. Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo were frequent collaborators beginning in the mid-80s with scripts for 1984's Trancers and 1985's Zone Troopers, which also featured Bilson's directorial debut. 1985 was also the year that they optioned the rights for Dave Stevens' The Rocketeer and began developing it into a feature film. 2 years after Supergirl bombed in theaters, 1 year before Superman Superman 4 marked the end of the Superman franchise for another 2 decades, Bilson and DeMeo were already on the cutting edge of the next chapter in comics to film. Disney bought their Rocketeer pitch, if for no other reason than it looked like a perfect vehicle to sell toys. But the Rocketeer was going to need a lot more development before Disney greenlit the project. In the meantime, Bilson and DeMeo found themselves at Warner Brothers, who were familiar with their previous sci-fi work. Warner Brothers owned DC Comics, and while Bilson and DeMeo weren't necessarily brought in to develop DC Comics characters for movies and television, that's what they did. 1986 was a big year for DC Comics. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons delivered the seminal genre deconstruction Watchmen, while Frank Miller handed in The Dark Knight Returns. 2 series that simultaneously matured the characters for an older audience while giving birth to the new dark age of comics, where grim and gritty violence became the standard. It was Watchmen in particular that inspired Bilson and DeMeo's first superhero series pitch, Unlimited Powers. Warner Brothers gave them carte blanche to choose from a library of DC characters, with a few exceptions like Superman and Batman. As DeMeo told the story, quote, "The script featured the Barry Allen version of the Flash along with a young Dr. Occult, the daughter of the Green Arrow, and Block, who was kind of like a cross between The Thing and Paul Chadwick's Concrete. The younger creative executives loved the script and wanted to do it, but the CBS brass were pretty conservative." Unlimited Powers was never given the go-ahead for production because it did not have an unlimited budget. A sprawling Cold War-inspired epic about a team of superheroes in a post-apocalyptic world run by supervillains decades in the future as a metaphor for the fears of nuclear proliferation and voluntary disarmament. Costumes, power effects, locations, Bilson and DeMeo showed their inexperience by pitching a television series that could not realistically be made. But the time and money spent developing the concept was not a total waste. See, through 1988, comics as a movie genre had never achieved box office legitimacy despite a bounty of Howard the Duck and Superman movies. That's 2 different franchises, Howard the Duck and Superman. Can you imagine? That all changed in June of 1989 when Batman, directed by Tim Burton starring Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, single-handedly changed the perception of superheroes as a viable mass-market entertainment medium. No longer the exclusive domain of children under 10, Batman proved that you could tell more mature stories, broaden the appeal to entire families, and keep a death grip on the core fan base of teens and under. When Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hit theaters less than a year later, there was no turning back. The success of Batman and Ninja Turtles across the spectrum of licensed merchandise spurred studio executives to find the next superhero to make the leap to movies and television. Properties from all kinds of comics, old and new, foreign and domestic, indie and mainstream, were suddenly ripe for exploitation. When Jeff Sagansky became CBS Entertainment president in January of 1990 after the success of Batman in theaters, he fast-tracked a new Bilson and DeMeo Flash series.
Word is spreading fast.
Flash was great.
It was awesome.
It was fantastic.
I would say it was 2 thumbs up.
America has a new hero.
Oh, gorgeous.
There's no stopping him.
I think it was better than Batman.
Cosby Show, the Simpsons, you're out. Catch the new superpower on Thursday. The Flash at a special time.
Things moved so fast that the series was picked up before the pilot was even finished filming. One of the things that helped sell The Flash was the costume. Batman set the new standard for what a realistic superhero outfit should be, and The Flash followed suit. The look for the suit was adapted from the comics designed by Rocketeer creator Dave Stevens, who took out the yellow boots, toned down the red, exchanged yellow accents for gold, and went Art Deco with the head wings. It was then fabricated by Stan Winston Studios under the direction of Robert Short, who had worked on E.T., Splash, and Beetlejuice. He's the guy that made the Killbots in 1986's Chopping Mall.
I warned you! I tell you!
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Gone were the skin-tight spandex of Adam West's Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman. Instead, it was a full-body cast, custom-made to fit actor John Wesley Shipp. 4 full suits were made at a cost of $100,000 apiece. Shipp landed the role of Barry Allen after nearly 60 actors were auditioned. Hot off of The Neverending Story Part 2, he initially declined to read for the role out of fears of being trapped in a campy, low-budget, spandex-laden production. After being assured this was a darker, more high-tech take like 1989's Batman, Shipp acquiesced and impressed producers with his ability to portray both humor and heroism. Not to mention his square-jawed look, his believability, and the chemistry with co-star Amanda Pays. Pays was cast as Star Labs research scientist and ultimately Barry's love interest, Dr. Tina McGee. Barry Allen's partner at Central City Crime Lab, Julio Mendez, was played by Alex Desire. Throughout the series, guest stars included Bryan Cranston, Jerry Ryan, Jeffrey Combs, my good friend Mark Dacascos, and the Mark Hamill as the Trickster. Warner Brothers made no secret of their desire to emulate the success of Batman in theaters and on television. The Flash was developed with a similar look, atmosphere, and sound of the Tim Burton movie. fact, the music for the series was composed by Danny Elfman and Shirley Walker, who worked together not only on Batman, but also Dick Tracy, which opened in theaters just a few months before Flash began airing on CBS. Elfman composed the main Flash theme. Walker keyed off of that to produce the rest of the music for the series. The Flash was one of the most expensive series CBS produced up to that point. The pilot alone cost $6 million, with each episode thereafter flirting with $1.6 million, with even more being spent to promote the series. Warner Brothers and CBS made sure audiences thirsty for more superhero action after seeing Batman in theaters tuned in to check out The Flash. Advertisements were plastered all over radio and television beginning in July of 1990. Money was poured into promotion during high-visibility television events like the NBA All-Star Game, real-world locations like Warner Brothers-owned Six Flags amusement parks, even banners flown behind airplanes at beaches on both coasts. It was inescapable. As George Schweitzer, Senior Vice President of Communications for CBS, described it, quote, "The Flash is not being sold as a comic book. It's being sold like Batman, dark and mysterious and exciting. The promos have a theatrical quality." With all the superhero hype surrounding Hollywood, Bilson and DeMeo quickly found themselves splitting their time as The Rocketeer was back on the top of Disney's priority list. Constant rewrites trying to finalize the screenplay meant that they were going to need a lot more help producing episodes for The Flash. They brought in Howard Chaykin and John Francis Moore, actual comic book writers, to shoulder some of the week-to-week scripting duties. Chaykin was fresh off a modern update to The Shadow, but was best known for his science fiction/political satire series American Flag. Moore was the first writer to work on American Flag after Chaykin. CBS believed in The Flash, and they scheduled it to take on their biggest competition on television at the time, Thursday nights at 8 p.m. against The Cosby Show. Unfortunately, Fox thought the same thing when they moved The Simpsons, a much more popular show than The Flash with the exact same demographic CBS was aiming for, to Thursday nights at 8 p.m. The Flash might have been able to defeat Bill Cosby, but he was no match for Bart Simpson. CBS moved quickly. They took the unconventional step of shifting The Flash, a one-hour show, back 30 minutes to 8:30, which put them up against NBC's A Different World and Fox's Babes instead. When that didn't work, they surrendered and moved The Flash to TV's graveyard, Saturday night. CBS continued to support Flash through 20 episodes after the pilot, but threw in the towel before reaching the finish line. Regardless of the night, the data showed that the target audience just wasn't watching. As Chaykin put it, quote, "I do know that it was a very difficult sell to the audience because there was nowhere on CBS, which in those days was the network that skewed much older than it does today, to sell a show like The Flash. The Flash was a young skewing show which had no precedent on the network, which is why they tried so many different ways to sell the show. They ran us on the half hour, they put us up against The Cosby Show and The Simpsons, and they kicked our ass." I don't know why I said it like that again. While The Flash got a huge push through licensed merchandise with many corporate partners that were already in place from Batman, the only action figures that were available at the time were Toy Biz's DC Comics superheroes originally released in 1989 on the heels of the Batman movie. The Flash figure wasn't modeled after the character design from the show and didn't have the series branding on it. However, the figure did appear in the episode Fast Forward, where the Flash is blown into a dystopian future where all Flash merchandise is considered contraband. If you were patient, though, Mattel released a figure based on the Flash TV series almost 30 years later in 2018. As part of their multiverse line, the John Wesley ship Flash was joined by Val Kilmer Batman, Linda Carter Wonder Woman, Danny DeVito Penguin, and Heath Ledger Joker. Good luck finding the Flash for less than $150 new in box. Several episodes of The Flash were re-edited and released as a series of movies on VHS, the 2-hour pilot in 1990, The Flash 2 Revenge of the Trickster in 1991, and Flash 3 Deadly Nightshade in 1991. The entire series was released on DVD in 2006. Today you can rent or purchase it on a variety of streaming platforms, including here on YouTube. Decades later, in 2014, The Flash finally returned to television, this time rebooted for the new millennium. Hot on the heels of the Warner Brothers CW series Arrow, it takes place in the same universe. John Wesley Shipp returns, but this time as Barry Allen's father, Henry Allen, who is in jail for murdering his wife, Barry's mom. As the series progresses and the Flash's powers expand, they inevitably tap into a hallmark of the DC Comics universe, the multiverse. Mark Hamill returns as the Trickster in the 2015 Season 1 episode Tricksters. Alex Desire returns as Julio Mendez in the 2016 Season 2 episode Flashpoint. And despite the death of Henry Allen, John Wesley Shipp stays on as a regular cast member playing the Flash of Earth 3, who looks exactly like Barry's father, but is actually Jay Garrick, the original comic book Flash. And later in 2018, the Arrowverse crossover series Elseworlds and the power of the multiverse brought Shipp back to the Flash he made famous. The 1990 series is given a proper sense of closure as viewers learn that Earth 90, Barry Allen, and Dr. Tina McGee did eventually get married and, presumably, lived happily ever after right before he sacrificed himself to save the multiverse. There have been multiple versions of the Flash across media since the end of the 1990 series. Live action, animated, live action that looks like it's animated. He's an integral part of the DC Comics and Warner Brothers portfolio of superheroes. He's saved Central City, the world, the universe, and the multiverse countless times and will do it all again now, in the past, and in the future. But he conquered his greatest enemy in 1990 when he brought big-budget superhero action to the small screen in a Flash. Seen that movie yet? No? Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, if you would like early access to the videos, ad-free, as well as behind-the-scenes features, sneak peeks at upcoming projects, and exclusive monthly podcast about the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy and let us know in the comments down below if you were as hyped as I was when The Flash hit TV. It literally felt like they found a way to continue the adventure of the Batman movie. Like, you know, they weren't actually going to be able to use Batman, but the idea that this was the beginning of a, I'm not sure what to call it, a cooperative storytelling venture, a simultaneously occupied narrative zone, a cinematic universe. It was so exciting. What a time to be alive. And then we all watched The Simpsons instead for the next 40 years. When will it end?
Never now.
Jesus Christ.
Cut.